The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, helping customers make the switch to solar for savings, energy security, and tax incentives. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, we'll get into the history of house music with Damany Gordon of Genuine Culture, LLC. We'll be throwing an event at Fame in Holyoke on the subject. Plus, Word Nerd Emily Brewster from Merriam-Webster will get us looking at hidden sounds in our language when we go on a search for silent letters.
But first, we're joined by Nell Irvin Painter. Ms. Painter does so many things. We'd be doing her a disservice by paraphrasing too much of it instead of hearing about it in her own words. But she is an educator, a historian, an artist, a writer, and more.
Nell Irvin Painter is the author of a number of books of history, including the New York Times bestseller, The History of White People, Sojourner Truth, A Life, as well as Old in Art School, a memoir of starting over. She has an M.A. and Ph.D. from Harvard and has received honorary degrees from institutions like Yale, Wesleyan, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and Dartmouth, and has served as president of the Organization of American Historians and the Southern Historical Association.
When not writing essays and drawing self-portraits, she makes artist books that visualize people and history, often in residencies such as MacDowell, Yaddo, Ucross, and Bogliasco. She has just published a collection of her essays entitled I Just Keep Talking. She's working on a new book on Sojourner Truth, and we haven't even gotten into her art career yet, really.
Nell Irvin Painter will speak at Bombyx Center for Arts this Sunday, June 9th, at an event in conjunction with the David Ruggles Center across the street. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Painter.
Oh, I'm so glad to be with you. You're in my favorite part of the world.
Tell us why it's your favorite part of the world here in the 413.
Well, for one thing, you have wonderful educational institutions, and you have at least two wonderful knitting stores.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
And you have a history of the Northampton Association for Education and Industry, which changed the life of Sojourner Truth and set her on I was going to say the journey, but that's too hackneyed. that made it possible for her to become the Sojourner Truth we know, who's a feminist abolitionist.
I'm curious, Dr. Painter, of the Sojourner Truth that you wrote about close to 50 years ago, I think, at this point.
No,
not quite?
25.
25, okay. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Well, I don't know why 73 jumped out of my head as the time that book came out. But how well-known a figure was Sojourner Truth in the general parlance before you started to write that book?
She was not terribly well-known. She was very well-known in centers of African-American history and women's studies. Mm-hmm. So I got started just looking at images of her on the doors of women's studies. And what struck me was that the picture, one of her carte de visite, so these were images that she made herself or had made herself, she is posed very calmly. She's holding her knitting, or she's holding a photograph of her grandson who served in the Union Army. There are flowers and a bouquet on the table behind her. So it's a very bourgeois self-presentation. But when you heard people talking about Sojourner Truth, she was this Black Power Sojourner Truth. You know, she was sort of almost snarling, ain't I a woman, or aren't I a woman? And she's she's really fierce. And I thought, well, how does that go together? Mm-hmm. And that's where my book started.
Along those lines, you've got an article, a fantastic article called Sojourner Truth was a New Yorker and she didn't say that.
That's the title of the new book.
But there's a correlating article in the Smithsonian that gets into why she didn't sound the way that people initially read that speech for years, nearly a century before anyone really looked at it and went, I don't think those are actually her words.
And specifically the ain't I a woman thing is which she's very famous for, but you're saying she never really said.
Well, she didn't say either, aren't I a woman or ain't I a woman? So let me give you just a little bit of history. Sojourner Truth was, as many leading abolitionists were in the 1850s, she was going around to meetings, and she was at a women's rights meeting in Akron, Ohio in 1851. And she did speak. She was one of several women who spoke up energetically. They were not at all cowed. And at the time, there was a designated amanuensis, a reporter, who knew her. His name was Marius Robinson. He was an abolitionist, and he was the editor of the local anti-slavery newspaper, the Anti-Slavery Bugle. So he wrote down what she was saying while she was speaking. So we have a contemporaneous report. It doesn't contain the refrain that Frances Dana Gage put in 12 years after the fact. So 12 years after Sojourner Truth spoke, Frances Dana Gage presented her version of Sojourner Truth, who says 4 times, aren't I a woman? So aren't I a woman was actually, it wasn't the favorite phrase associated with Sojourner Truth in the 19th and early 20th centuries, because Harriet Beecher Stowe had written about Sojourner Truth, and she ended with a rhetorical question, Frederick, is God dead? And that Sojourner Truth, Harriet Beecher Stowe's Sojourner Truth, was really kind of a faithful Christian who was denying Frederick Douglass's statement that those who were enslaved should take the law into their own hands. So Harriet Beecher Stowe's Sojourner Truth was saying God will take care of it. And so it was very hard to slot Sojourner Truth into the history of Black activism for the longest time, because Frederick is God dead wasn't exactly a sterling phrase. But somehow in the 20th century, and I don't know who did it or when, aren't I a woman got changed into ain't I a woman. And that seemed to make Sojourner Truth more authentic as a Black person. And if you knew that Sojourner Truth had been enslaved and you thought that she, issued this defiant statement, ain't I a woman, that she must be a Southerner. So she was this mysterious, very flat figure for the longest time. So my concern is that we not confuse the art, the journalism of a white woman writer, Frances Dana Gage. I don't say that Frances Dana Gage was racist. She wasn't, but she was not Black, and she wrote 12 years after Sojourner Truth spoke, and she invented a very dramatic persona. And that very dramatic persona has entranced Americans and also discouraged them from learning more about Sojourner Truth. So I say Sojourner Truth didn't say that, and we need to understand that there was so much more to her and to the women around her. So if you get past the phrase, you can see that there were other Black women who were active in anti-slavery, who were feminists also. We need to know about them. Women like Frances Harper. And also that Sojourner Truth was, she published her own autobiography. So she belonged to a really rich tradition of Black people writing or dictating, but publishing their very own books and pamphlets. So there is a rich history of writing and reading that coexists during the slavery era that Ain't I a Woman just blots out. We need to know so much more about this fascinating woman.
Yeah. Plus, it's interesting, like, you have Sojourner Truth as this figure who has taken control of her narrative, both in photographic form and in narrative form with her publishing her own story.
Yes.
And yet, like, despite that, 12 years later, the thing that gets held on to is this reinterpretation, which I find
it's so
telling.
And that's, we Americans are not known for our tolerance of more than a few sentences in history.
Right.
And I would urge readers and thinkers to, add a few more sentences to our understanding of history and of historical persons.
We're speaking with historian Dr. Nell Irvin Painter, who will be at the Bombyx Center for Arts and Equity this Sunday, right across the street from where Sojourner Truth made her home for a time.
And right near her statue, too.
Her beautiful statue. And, you mentioned as we began this conversation that she took some bourgeois photos of herself, but those were intentional. That was part of the narrative, like her writings that she wanted to put out there. Tell us about that and why that was important to her.
She presented herself as a whole figure. I say she appears as a bourgeoise. I doubt that she intended to appear as a bourgeoise, but she wanted to appear as a respectable person,
right,
and not as some downtrodden ex-slave. So, for instance, she had a misshapen hand from an injury when she was enslaved. And in one of the photographs, you can see it if you look very closely because she's holding a cane. But in the best-known pictures, you would never know. She's very well dressed. She wants you to see her knitting, her grandson, and also her clothing is, it's very nice. So it's not that I want you to think of her as a bourgeoise. I want you to think of her as a respectable person.
Which is the way that she wanted us to think about her, hence why she had the pictures taken at a time where that wasn't overly common necessarily.
Yes.
We're speaking with Nell Irvin Painter, who will be at the Bombyx Center for Arts this Sunday, June 9th, in conjunction with the David Ruggles Center, where there's a million things we could talk to you about. We want to talk to you about your knitting and your artwork and becoming getting a BA in art later in your life.
BA and MFA.
And so much more.
Life. That's right. Yeah.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We are with Dr. Nell Irvin Painter, who is coming to Bombyx Center for Arts and Equity in Florence this Sunday. She also has a series of essays that was recently published called I Just Keep Talking. She's been published everywhere. If you do a search for her in the New York Times, so much pops up. But I wanted to ask you about your art, because you went back to school for a bachelor's degree after you'd already had a long career being a history professor, and then got your MFA as well. And I'm especially curious about how those two things intersect, because they definitely seem to in your work. You have a triptych that centers around a runaway slave ad for Harriet Jacobs that enters some of your other art. Can we talk about how those intersections ended up happening for you?
Oh, it was so hard. It was so hard. First of all, getting an MFA in painting from the Rhode Island School of Design was infinitely harder than getting a PhD in history from Harvard.
Wow. Them's fighting words.
Actually, if you apply to the Princeton History Department for a PhD, to get into the PhD program, your chances are better than applying to get into the MFA in painting at the Rhode Island School of Design.
Wow.
Because there's similar numbers of people applying, but whereas there are about 20 people who can enter this, it may be smaller now, but we're talking in the double digits of people who were admitted every year into the PhD program at Princeton. But there are only 8 people admitted to the painting program at RISD for an MFA. So the competition is really fierce. But the hard thing for me was that my teachers really slapped my hand about using historical themes or topics. So I had to start anew, and I had to learn about the meaning of visual meaning as opposed to discursive meaning, so that an image can make sense and please your eye, even if you can't explain it in words, even if it doesn't make any sense in words. So I had to learn to make images that made sense in their own terms. And it took me about 10 years after my MFA to be able to return to text and return to historical topics, really.
You've given both sides of your brain an extremely intense workout, it seems.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your knitting. You mentioned one of the things you love about the Valley is that there are 2 knitting stores, and then you also mentioned that Sojourner Truth was really interested in showing off her knitting.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned that you kind of didn't want to be known as a knitter.
That's right.
Did your knitting come before or after your history dive into Sojourner Truth?
Way before.
Oh, interesting.
I started knitting in the 80s when I lived in Chapel Hill, and I couldn't find anything to wear.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting.
So I've been knitting for a long time, and I would knit in meetings. People know me for going to meetings of the Organization of American Historians, or, any other scholarly meetings. And I would just sit there and knit, and then I would ask a devastating question, which always surprised people because I guess they thought it plugged up my ears when I was knitting. But at any rate, so I did knit in public, but I never embraced myself as a knitter because there was so much overhead about old women and knitting and crafts. Some of my favorite artists, like Joyce Kozloff, come out of a tradition of fine art that is related to textiles. And also some of my favorite artists use textiles. So, but that has been sort of sidelined as craft. And I think I was hesitant to associate with that. I wanted to be a scholar, historian, not a little old lady who knits. And then, one of the great things about getting old is you just don't give a shit for.
Remember, you're on the radio, Dr. Nell Irvin Painter. We are governed by the FCC, multiply decorated PhD.
You are less scared by how you appear in other people's eyes. And that has happened to me as an old lady. I feel much freer. And
I can see.
So I have been much more open about being a knitter. And one of the things that people say they're looking forward to in the new Sojourner Truth book is the section on knitting. Sojourner Truth Knitter.
It's fascinating. And the new book is due out when?
It's not due out.
It's
do it in your own pace.
On.
Yeah, it's like a good scarf.
She just put out a book.
It'll be done when it's done. And the new book is I Just Keep Talking, and that'll be the book that you will be talking about at the Bombyx Center for Arts and Equity this Sunday.
But if somebody asks me about knitting, I'll talk about knitting. Because that book ends with knitting. It ends with I knit socks for Adrian.
That's so cool. Oh, yeah, that's right. And the project that you did in COVID, like kind of embracing the fact that you knit.
Yes.
I was going to ask if RISD kind of put it in your mind that like crafting like that was not necessarily art, but that's a less interesting question than I could ask you about Huey Newton.
Yeah, Huey Newton and I were in the same high school class.
That is fascinating.
It's still there. It's a big high school. I could talk about my high school for a long time, but I won't do that unless you ask me to talk about it. But the point about my high school, very briefly, it's a great big high school. And I was tracked even before I went to high school as gifted, and he wasn't. We also lived in different neighborhoods in Oakland. And so I never had a class with him, and I didn't know him. I don't know if I ever spoke to him, but I knew who he was because he was so handsome, and he wore a suit to high school. So I knew who he was, from the time that we were in high school. When I was in college at Berkeley, a few years. No, the Panthers came after I graduated, but there was a lot of ferment in Oakland in the 60s, and I sort of sniffed around, but there was so much misogyny, and it was so macho that I was never a Panther, for instance, because it was so male-centered. I agreed with a lot of their politics, but also I was no longer in Oakland when they really came to the fore.
Still cool.
It's still cool that there, something must have been in the water in that school system to make such important people.
No, it's Oakland. Oakland is a fantastic city. It's a really interesting city with a good, strong, progressive history.
We're speaking with Nell Irvin Painter, who will be at the Bombyx Center for Arts this Sunday, June 9th, in conversation with Lisa Baskin about her new collection of essays called I Just Keep Talking.
You did some work at Harvard on Black journalism and then later come out with a book on whiteness. And I'm curious about the connections between those two things, too, because I feel like there's definitely some threads in finding out who writes in community and then looking a little bit deeper into the larger set or another set of people that have kind of pigeonholed them.
Mm-hmm. No, what I did at Harvard was not connected to, or at least that I know of, to the history of white people. But I was always struck that even though we have, whole libraries of the intellectual history of the concept of blackness, there's virtually nothing, or was, on the history of whiteness. And I really got started with the word Caucasian. Why are white Americans called Caucasian? I mean, most Americans, black or white, don't know where the Caucasus is or what Caucasians look like. And in fact, the Caucasus, I have actually been to Georgia in the Caucasus.
And we're talking about Georgia in Europe, not Georgia in the States or the Iowa Caucasus. These are mountains.
Yeah. It's a peninsula between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. So it's right there on the borderline between Asia and Europe. And as befits a borderline place, there are people who look all kinds of ways. There are people who look like Germans. There are people who look like Chinese people. There are people who look like Tibetans. There are people who look like Indians, subcontinent Indians. So there's no one face of Caucasians if you really look there. So the question was, huh? So that's how the book got started.
It's a fascinating read. The history of white people is what it's called, and the construct of whiteness behind it that you delve into amongst so many other incredible topics throughout your historic journey as well as now your artistic journey. And I have a feeling many of these topics will come up this Sunday at the Bombyx Center for Arts and Equity when you talk about I Just Keep Talking, your new book with Lisa Baskin. Dr. Nell Irvin Painter, thank you so much for joining us here today in the Fabulous 413.
So welcome. A pleasure to speak with you.
The book of essays is a really good cross-section of her work, so do check out the new book, I Just Keep Talking, and go see her on Sunday. Soon we'll delve into even more history with Damany Gordon of Genuine Culture, who are hosting an event looking at two pillars of house music, Frankie Knuckles and Levon Levin?
Yes.
Yeah.
Next, we'll take you through the alphabet silently with Emily Brewster from Merriam-Webster.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
We're going to talk about silent letters.
I have one of those in my name, but it says things.
Explain that, Khalees, to people who don't know how to spell your name and only hear it on the radio and have 1,000 different variations of what they think you're saying and how to spell it.
I only ever got up to 47 when I was counting. I'm sure there's more out there. If you've got them, by all means, send them along. But the long E, there's an extra I.
2 I's make a long E sound?
2 I's make a long E sound generally in English for what little evidence there is.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't think of other words that have...
Besides skiing?
Skiing. Oh, yeah, nice. We're talking with Emily Brewster, resident Worcester from Merriam-Webster, about silent letters.
There are so many. In fact, most letters are silent. Almost every single letter is silent in some word or some set of circumstances. Can you think of any, for example, where the letter A is silent?
Aardvark. One of them is silent.
Oh, that's a good one.
My name is Arthur, and my dog is named Pal, and blah.
You done messed up, Aaron!
Yeah.
I mean, you could always
Also
say...
in the word aisle, like walking down the aisle. Same thing too with bread.
Yep.
But if you take the A out, then you're left with the past tense of breed.
Right.
So the A is useful mostly for just being certain you're talking about a comestible as opposed to an animal husbandry sort of thing.
Or maybe if you have some sort of sourdough starter, then
You're doing both at the same time.
you have bread.
Yeah. Now, B is an interesting silent letter.
Numb.
Because,
Limb.
yes, and often after M's, right?
Yes.
Climb.
Dumb.
Here's the crazy thing about a particular B. The B in debt was a gift given to us by some people who wanted to show the words debt to Latin because it comes from debitum in Latin, but in English and in Middle French, there was no B at all. D-E-T-T-E was how you spelled the word debt. And after that had all been, like, people had been using that and doing that, and that was fine and great, and people could spell it. Then these people who thought that, oh, well, you know, it actually comes from this Latin word, it should signal that to us in some way. They added a B in. Same thing happened with the B in the word doubt. Oh, and subtle is another one. But for the most part, you have a silent B when it comes after an M. Climb, comb, crumb, dumb, lamb.
I want there to be a band called Crumb Dum Lamb.
Yeah. Okay, C, like in czar.
Is it technically silent in excite?
Yeah,
No.
Exity.
I think it would. Like X can say, and that C is superfluous for sure. That is a silent C.
And then-
also science and scissors.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
When there's a CK, technically, which letter are you pronouncing? Is it the C or the K?
Oh.
Are zebras black with white stripes or white with black stripes?
I mean, I guess we could say that in all of those cases, the C is silent.
Pretty sure zebras are black with white stripes.
English doesn't like to end one-syllable words in the letter C. And you get the CK when the vowel is short or when it says its sound as opposed to its name.
Okay, D.
Yeah. I only know of 3. Handkerchief, handsome, and Wednesday.
Oh, wow, and they're pretty common ones.
Oh, yeah, Wednesday.
I have a tight deadline. Emphasis on dead.
I still say Wednesday every time I spell it.
Yep.
I do too. Just,
Yep.
yeah. And that, of course, comes from the name of some Norse god Woden, right? It was Woden's Tag. It was Woden's Day. That's why the D is there. The D has a decent reason for being there, but we don't say it anymore. Okay, E, lots of E's.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're like, you've got the whole silent E that makes the vowel say its name.
Right.
Like in bike and cake and take. But then we also have, you know, a superfluous E in the word give.
Oh, yeah, because it doesn't say give.
Yeah.
English does not like to end words in the letter V. And when I used to be a reading teacher, I would explain to my students that it's because if you don't have an E to prop up the V will fall over.
Where are we at now? F.
F.
I only know of one, and some people do pronounce it. Fifth.
Oh, fifth. I think I pronounce it. So
Fifth.
But you don't have to. And actually, the first pronunciation in our dictionary is fifth. Slips right over that second F.
Fifth.
I don't even know how I say it anymore. I've said it too many times out loud now.
Yeah. All right. G's got a ton, especially with the N.
I love to say when somebody says, like, does it start with G? I say, yes, G as in gnat, or G as in new.
This is Gary Gnu, and the No Gnus is Good Gnu show.
Yes. And then you also have like the high, though, thought, that whole thorough, those words have got those G's also.
Jeez.
Okay. H.
ache doesn't pronounce the H. I guess it does make the C sound more hard so that you get it as ache instead of achi.
But you could spell it A-K-E, and that would be the same thing.
But
you also have the word heir, like heir to the throne, honest, and honor.
People say an historic. They even give it the like the A-N instead of the A. Yeah.
Huge voter turnout. And I say huge.
Also rhyme.
Hour.
Roast. All right, the letter I can only think of 2.
Khalees.
3. We don't enter Khalees in the dictionary yet.
Not
I'm
yet.
sorry.
Oh, God, please
It's going to have to take on generic use, and I don't think Khalees is up for that.
Yeah, no. Look for Khalees under the entry for milkshakes.
My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard.
Oh, yeah, that's a different Khalees.
Hers is less phonetically correct.
Yeah.
My favorite word that has a silent I is just a ridiculous word if you think about how it's spelled. It's the word business, because the U is pretending to be an I, and then the actual I is not doing anything.
Mind your own business, I.
Yeah.
And then there's the word suit. If it were a decent word, it would be spelled S-O-O-T, I guess. Like wear a business suit. Then it would look like soot.
I wonder why all these business people want to have all these silent I's. Maybe because they're so selfish.
Late stage capitalism.
I'll just throw in an I because I can.
You like Huey Lewis in the news?
I think there is only one word in English with a silent J. I want to see if you can guess it.
I know there's a silent Bob, but I didn't know there was a silent J.
Dad here watched Empire and Jedi last week, and ever since he's been trying to do the Jedi mind trick.
I can think of a bunch of them in Polish. Like, I believe...
Your first hint is that this word has 4 syllables.
Oh.
No, I don't know what.
Marijuana.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's technically not English either.
Right.
Like, so I could say Sikowski, like Wally, the farmer we talked to. I think there might be a J in that name somewhere, or like CZAJKOWSKI.
I love that. That is so insane.
I don't think we should count marijuana in that either, because that just is another language that we've brought into this language.
Which is what most of our words are, right?
I
Like
guess.
I mean, as far as the number of words that comprise the English language, the majority of them, as far as numbers go, are borrowed from other languages.
Yeah, there is no such thing as
Marijuana has been
English.
part of the English language since the late 19th century. So it's like, it is here. It definitely counts as an English word.
Okay.
Okay, the K ones are not anything exceptional, right? We all know those. I think they all have N's.
Do we all know them?
Now, the thing about those, though, is that it's interesting to know that we used to pronounce them. So the word knife used to be knife.
We should go back to that.
No.
Yeah, and actually that's the same with the GNs also. We pronounced these until relatively recently. There's no reason why modern English doesn't allow these combinations. The word that I think of for the silent L, it's a word that I kind of love to hate because it's so absurd. Do you know what it is?
Is it llama?
No.
Because we only need one.
No, it's a good one. The word is kernel.
Oh, yeah.
Colonel.
That is so weird.
Where the L is an R. Yeah.
Yeah, good luck learning English, anybody.
At least in Japanese, like L and R sounds are so close that like that's what you substitute since there's no L's in Japanese. So it's just like, oh, hey, look, we did it for you, sort of.
Now, there also, you've got the silent L in should, would, could.
Right.
We believe that the L in could was later added. Ostensibly, it was a group of people who decided that could should have an L so that it was that would, could, should would just be a nice trio the way that they are.
I think that was a wise decision.
Yeah.
Let's get some things in line here, English. Come on.
I think I agree. Also, these words, should and would, they used to rhyme with gold and told. So it was shoaled and wold.
Whoa. Okay, we're on M.
I only know of one. Do either of you know what it might be?
Mnemonic.
Yeah.
Woo! I don't even
Mnemonic.
know. I just always have Keanu Reeves on the mind, so there's Johnny Mnemonic.
The other crazy thing about mnemonic is that the M also used to be pronounced.
Mnemonic.
Minimo? Oh, my goodness.
I think that's how we ended last week's show, so we can't do that again.
No.
Although you should watch the new Jim Henson documentary on Disney Plus. It's excellent.
Okay, good to know.
I'll let you borrow my password.
No.
All right, N.
N silent all over the place.
Especially after M.
And mnemonic is the only time it wins?
It's like, this is my time to shine.
Wow, there's a big drama actually there that I hadn't considered.
I can't think of one word right off the top of my head that has MN in it, though.
Solemn.
Solemn.
Damn, am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you are.
Okay. Damn. Oh, okay. How about O?
It's got to be next to another vowel.
That isn't also an O.
Colonel, again, is one.
Stupid
right?
colonel.
Because it's got that second O doesn't do a blessed thing, and the first one Also really doesn't. Also the word people.
People.
Leopard and jeopardy are also ones.
Pneumonia.
Psychology. Psychotic.
Yep.
Psilocybin, keeping it with the drug theme.
Socid.
These P's also used to be pronounced.
Socid.
And still are in French, and we got it from French originally.
Psychology.
From yeah. Psst. Psst. Right. And why can't we say pneumonia?
See, that's why.
Silent Q. This one's going to be tough, I bet. Is it? Or
yeah, I only know one. Again, I just know one. Lacquer. Lacquer.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy thing about this is that this word was borrowed in the late 16th century, borrowed from a Portuguese word that has no Q. Who knows why we put a Q in it, but we did.
Because it's pretty.
Now we have a Q.
R.
I say February, but most people don't say, or a lot of people don't say February. So if you say February, then there is no silent R in February. But if you say February, then there is a silent R. There is also a very obscure nautical pronunciation of this word, Forecastle. Forecastle.
Oh, yeah. I think we talked about this one.
Yeah. Forecastle. Yes, we did. It's noted as a word that has this silent R, except, it's not even a word anybody uses anymore.
S.
Also added, unhelpfully, island. That S was put in there. The word island traces back to the Old English word I with a macron over it. That's the straight line. G, L-A-N-D. And those two parts were ig and land. That together meant island. That comes from Old English. But then English also adapted the word isle, I-S-L-E, and one would think that these words would be from the same source, but they are not. Isle traces back through French to the Latin word insula, 16th century.
Peninsula.
Exactly. Pen meaning, almost or just before. It was in the 16th century that people just got this idea. I think this was more a mistake than an intention by people wanting to actually reflect the etymology. But the S was added into island because of isle. Rather unhelpful, I think.
Neither aisle uses their S.
No.
The aisle in the grocery store or Gilligan's Isle. Here on Gilligan's Isle. T. There's something that's got to have a TZ at the beginning. Or Tchaikovsky.
That's a name.
Yeah. Well, so is Tchaikovsky.
I mean, there's Tsar again.
That's true.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Tsunami, except that the T kind of is pronounced.
Yeah, that sounds tsunami.
That's pronounced because it's from the Japanese. It uses the character tsu, which uses the T.
Tchotchkes. How do you spell that?
Tchotchke.
Ah, there you go.
That's a really good one. Also, ballet.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Castle.
So French is where we go. Oh, castle. Yeah.
Listen. Also, whistle.
Nestle.
Yeah.
We uncovered that one.
Okay, there are a lot. We're doing away with some of them, though, which I find to be interesting. Like GUE happens on the end of a number of words. League, colleague, dialogue, catalog. But both dialogue and catalog now have very commonly used versions that do not have the UE at the end.
Yeah, they just use the G.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Foxborough.
Yeah, they just stop right there.
Or borough. Yeah, Foxborough has two spellings, the B-O-R-O-U-G-H and then the just B-O-R-O. Yeah.
And do you see that as progress or as a kind of loss?
Both.
I apologize. It seemed like I was a little short with you after the game.
Silent V.
There is none, as far as I know, except for a short time, there kind of was one. It was really in Twitter's heyday, which I think of as 16, 17. Maybe that's when I was enjoying it most. You all may remember that, there was a very, very famous Twitter user who was then expelled from Twitter for a while and then was permitted back. This Twitterer had many, 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 many followers and was watched very carefully for every tweet. And one time in May of 2017, there was a tweet.
I remember what this is.
I remember this too now.
They were just convicted of 34 felony counts.
Exactly.
Of covfefe. That's not a real word. What's the definition? Nobody even knows. Is it in the dictionary?
Right. No. That's why I said it doesn't really count. But for a time, it seemed, it has no official pronunciation. It was written, and it was a typo, of course, right? He fell asleep mid-tweet or something. But of the different pronunciations that were discussed in the wake of this enigmatic tweet. The one with the silent V seemed to be the one that, right? That's what you just said, Covfefe.
Yeah.
That was the only pronunciation that really seemed to make sense to people was Covfefe, which, just to be clear, was Covfefe. That's our best, at that point anyway, was our best bet for a silent V.
Covfefe, it's such a shame. The world's in a mess and Covfefe's to blame.
W.
Most of them have R's. They're like in cahoots with the letter R.
Right.
Letting R do all the work.
I mean, right.
Wrap and wrist and wrangle.
Wrestle, rot. Now, the thing about the WR combination is that these two used to be pronounced. So we used to say the word wrap, like I'm going to wrap this present, like wrap. Excuse me, I have to wrap these presents.
Well, some people, including your family members and maybe even you, say wheat.
Wheat. Yes, my beloved husband says wheat.
And which? Does he also say which?
He does. And the really annoying thing is that he actually does it consistently. Because I really didn't believe in it at first. It was like, you're not really saying that, are you? Yeah,
believe in what?
But nobody really says wrist anymore.
It's too hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard. It's very hard to say. It would slow us down way too much. Okay, you also have a silent W in words like answer and sword. Also the number 2.
Oh yeah.
X.
Got nothing.
I only know 2 words, but the same element is silent. It's faux and faux pas.
It's those French rearing their heads again.
Right.
Yeah.
Why do you think I have this outrageous accent, you silly king?
Them with all their silent letters. So many silent letters.
Why?
At least that one seems like there's something semantically pleasing about the silent letter in that case.
Oh, that's why. But speaking of
I
why.
think so.
Why?
Again, I only know of 1 word for this one. And you can argue that it is not silent. I'm on the side of it actually being silent. Do you give up?
Yes.
Beyond.
Yeah,
But
you don't need it. And you say yonder.
Right.
And yawn.
Right. But if you took out the Y,
you could
if you
still
took out
say
the Y,
beyond.
Right.
If you say replaced the Y with a hyphen,
Beyond.
it would be
Beyond.
exactly the same. Beyond.
Beyond say.
Yeah. All right. We're finally to the last one. And again, we blame the French.
You don't blame the Italians where we put them next to each other and it sounds like a T.
Yeah, I can only think of shay, which is an imported word, and I don't.
No. Imported words count.
Okay,
shay is it's one of them for sure. If we left out all the words we imported from French, Khalees,
I know there would be so little of English left.
our conversation would sound very different. So shay for sure. Also, how some people regard, a particular version of economics, laissez-faire.
And also one avenue of your economics, Emily Brewster, resident wordster from Merriam-Webster, co-owner of the Rendezvous in Turner's Falls.
Yes. Also has a silent Z. Yes.
There's your silent alphabet for you.
There it is. The whole thing in all its splendor.
Thank you, Emily Brewster.
You are so welcome.
Go looking for silent letters in your conversations.
Send us your favorite silent letter combinations and any other questions for the Word Nerd at thefab413@nepm.org.
Coming up, getting into the origins of house music with Damany Gordon of Genuine Culture LLC.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. This Saturday at Fame Lounge in downtown Holyoke, step onto the dance floor and let the legendary DJ Doc Martin transport you to the heart of the underground house music scene with his masterful selection of classics.
Joining him behind the decks is the dynamic DJ Rec. Together, these two maestros will pay homage to the pioneers of house music, the godfathers of house, if you will, Larry Levan and Frankie Knuckles, whose groundbreaking contributions continue to inspire generations of music lovers worldwide.
The evening is produced by Genuine Genuine Culture LLC, and from Genuine Culture is our friend Damany Gordon, active member, supporter, and advocate for the hip-hop community, and still diversity and equity specialist for the Amherst Public Schools?
That's right, yes.
Awesome.
Great.
So tell us about these godfathers. Well, first of all, what's house music for the folks that might not be able to differentiate the nuances of these beats?
Because it's not just what you listen to at home.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. It's music that you pretty much hear outside the house. And it's dance-based music, and it's kind of like a feeling, you know. It's a combination of disco, R&B, soul, and it's really danceable. And it has a lot of messages in it, too. But it's really just about bringing people together to dance and have a great time.
It's like one of the earlier forms of electronic music, especially in like Black culture and queer culture. And one of the cool things about this is that you've got two of the centers of house music being elevated. You've got Larry Levan from like New York, and then Frankie Knuckles out of the Midwest. So yeah, let's talk about the godfathers of house. And
yes.
Why bring these two together? And they're different. They've got different perspectives on going about it too.
For sure. And like you just mentioned, just the intersectionality of house music, you know, being started by gay Black men. And, you know, here it's Black Music Month, it's June, and it's also Pride Month. So it's the perfect time to represent this, I think. And in terms of Larry Levan and Frankie Knuckles, they were good friends. You know, they were also friends. They knew each other. And they started out DJing together in Paradise Garage, the legendary spot that Larry Levan was the resident DJ at. And then Frankie Knuckles went down to Chicago to play at the Warehouse. And that's where the term house music came from, because it was based on the music that Frankie Knuckles was playing in Chicago at the Warehouse.
So we got rid of the Ware, just kept the house.
That's right.
The Ware for this house music is going to be at Fame on Saturday. Tell us about the DJs that'll be spinning house music for the Genuine Culture event.
Yes, excited about this. DJ Rec will be opening up the set. Just amazing. You know, Rex just, you know, has a great musical palette. So he's going to be setting off, and just really excited to bring DJ Doc Martin. He's from Connecticut, but he's a house music legend DJ. He currently, you know, spins all over, still keeping the house music culture alive. He's also resident DJ on WBLS called Roots Live NYC, which is, I think, the longest running house music show that's still going on now. So it's definitely a pleasure to have him and his historical knowledge and his music. We're going to turn up. I'm so hyped about it.
It's so cool. There's like, I feel like house music honestly like doesn't get as much credit as it should for like, again, the way that it influenced electronic music to come, because not only are we getting influences from across the pond, like house music is influenced by Kraftwerk and some of the electronic music that was happening with that, specifically that band, but like afterwards, like EDM comes out of this, like drum and bass comes out of this, like you get like techno coming out of this, and like grindcore. So like what really like makes house as opposed to those other electronic forms of music?
Yeah, I think house, the foundation is the groove. It's really the groove and the rhythms. And I think with the you know, the other genres, they added their little things on. But I think with house, it's about the groove, the music, and just the way it makes you feel, right? There's a saying, a house is a feeling, and it really is. So if you haven't experienced it, I suggest you come out and move your body.
Yes.
You work as a diversity and equity specialist for the Amherst Public Schools.
Yes.
Do kids these days have any frame of reference for house music?
Not much. Like you were just saying, Khalees, it's basically under the umbrella of EDM, right? Which is, you know, more techno and more stuff like that. But in terms of the foundations of house music, I think there's a lot of people that don't know about it, you know, from kids on to adults, you know. Sometimes people hear it. You know, they don't know what house music is. When they hear it, they're like, oh, I know this song. I know what this is, but they don't reference it as house music.
Yep.
Are there icons, like the top 40 of house music, that stick out to you, Damany Gordon from Genuine Culture LLC?
Yeah, I mean, Larry Heard, a.k.a. Mr. Fingers, of course, Frankie Knuckles, Jesse Saunders, Jack Farley. There's so many. And then you have the Detroit house and Detroit techno with all that scene over there. But there's so many that contributed. You can't forget Masters at Work with Louis Vega and Kenny Dope, Little Louis Vega. So there's so many legends, and their music lives on.
Yeah. And you've even got like hip hop acts like Jungle Brothers kind of sneaking their way in there too. Like Jungle Brothers is low key house,
That's
but
right.
hip hop at the same time. It's wicked cool.
That's right. There was a whole hip hop movement
Right.
at that time. You know, like you said, Jungle Brothers set it off. Queen Latifah. There's a whole genre of that too. So yeah.
And the two of the godfathers of house music will be celebrated at Fame this Saturday in Holyoke, Larry Levan and Frankie Knuckles. Genuine Culture LLC putting this whole thing on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Damany, about this great work that you're doing, continuing to curate, putting these get-togethers.
Thank you.
Highlighting the history of recorded music, especially recorded black music with Genuine Culture. This is the whitest thing I could have done, which is take Larry Levan's remix of the Dan Hartman song,
There you go.
Dream About
There
You,
you go.
from the Streets of Fire soundtrack.
But it is really good, and he makes the beat better, so you know it's okay.
That's right.
I mean, I'm a sucker with the song, I ain't gonna lie.
It's cool now.
Next, we got to bring your kids out so that they learn a little bit more about house. It's like baby house
For
show.
real.
Thank you so much, Damany. Tomorrow on the show, we'll
Thank
take you
you.
backstage to the Drake and Amherst to talk with legendary proto-punk band Buffalo Tom.
We'll hear some live music from their sound check and check in with their frontman Bill Janovitz about their latest album and their time at UMass Amherst.
Plus Congressman Jim McGovern on those 34 felonies. I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Khalees Smith. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.